Richard is joining us here today, and Richard, can you go ahead and explain to us a little bit about yourself and your program with U-PASS?
Certainly. I'm Richard McPherson. I teach high school agriculture in Rio Rico, Arizona. We're a 1,400 student body high school about 15 miles north of the Mexico border, north of Nogales, Arizona.
Awesome. And can you tell us a little bit about your program that you're doing with those kids?
So what I do in high school agri-science is I'm part of the career technical education umbrella of the Carl Perkins federal grant portion of the U.S. Department of Education. And what we do specifically is prepare students for college and career-ready opportunities in agriculture.
Okay, and how does your program help them be more prepared in that industry?
So what we do is we prepare all of our high school seniors, our program completers, to receive tests for industry credentials and certifications. And so one of them that we utilize at Rio Rico is the FAA Part 107 Commercial Drone Pilot Operator's License.
Okay, and after they receive that license, after they have that certification, how can that help them further their career after high school?
So what they can do with that Part 107 certification is, the qualifications is they have to be able to, the minimum age for that certification is 16 years old. So at the age of 16, they can go into business for themselves as an entrepreneur doing commercial drone pilotage, or they can go to work for commercial industry businesses and charge per day or per hour rates commercially flying drones.
And they can do that at 16, or they're just certified to start that process?
They can do that at 16.
Okay.
So what we did several years ago, I went to a professional development event at a summer conference for ag teachers, and I saw one of these drones in agriculture workshops, and they were introducing the concept of precision agriculture. And I saw what was going on, and I saw that it had a major upside, even though the presentation was somewhat chaotic and disjointed, but I knew that there was something that my kids could utilize. I went back to Rio Rico, wrote a curriculum, taught that curriculum, trial and error, tweaked it, find out what it is that the kids wanted to learn, what the industry needed them to learn, and then packaged that curriculum up and taught it for a couple of years.
So if you have a kid coming through your program that gets the certification at the age of 16, typically a kid graduates high school at 18, so how can you help them even further for the next 2 years along in the industry? So
these students, once they get that certification, they typically charge $250 a day or $25 an hour. And so a high school student really has a lot of non-high school time on their life. And so what they can do is they work after school, they work weekends, holidays, and all summer flying drones for ranchers doing scouting on fence lines, farmers doing scouting on crop fields. They can do real estate videography. We work with a lot of landscape architects, scouting jobs, daily flyovers of those construction jobs, doing progress reports, and that entire time they're just making money. And like I tell the kids, it's really hard to get a job at McDonald's in a town that doesn't have McDonald's.
Exactly.
And so they work for themselves, they set their own schedule, they set their own rates, and they make their own money.
So really it's almost like a trade school associate's degree at the same time they're in high school, because they're coming out of high school with 2 years under their belt potentially in a industry specific trade.
Correct. And then at that point they can, typically they graduate, they may be 17 or they could have already been 18 years old, depending on where they've been working and what they want to do. At 18, then they can go to work for any of these commercial sprayer applicators like you see, and then they can apprentice, fly, and test for their 137 certification, and then through the departments of agriculture they can become their own pesticide applicators, and then they start making serious money. Not that $25 an hour for a high school kid's not a serious money job.
So if a kid graduated high school and wanted to continue their education, what would their path of education be instead of just jumping straight into the workforce?
So that's a great question. So there's a lot of different things that these drone pilot knowledge base provides for a high school student. They can go to a community college, they can enroll in a certification program there, take business classes, get their associate's degree, still have that Part 107 license, and now they're a much better prepared business operator. They can do that. They can go to a university and get a full-on business degree, marketing, advertising degree, major in agronomy, get a PCA license, start their own consulting business, or if they're fortunate, they can go back to the farm and they can, for own hire, cut out the middleman and custom spray and apply.
With drone technology just evolving all the time and changing all the time, how does that affect you as an educator teaching these kids? I know they absorb things like sponges, but I feel like, does it change too rapidly, or is it at a steady pace where the kids can keep up, that you can keep up as an educator with them?
Well, I can't keep up with them. They're much better at adapting to the newest technologies that are coming out, and they are the ones that bring suggestions to me that then I pass along to the regulators, to the industry, to the manufacturers, and say, it'd really be nice if your tool did this. It'd be really nice if your tool did that. This is really quirky, clunky, and not very user-friendly. How can you soften that learning curve? They bring that to me. The technology is always getting better. You know, we started off with the Mavic 2 that is now discontinued, obsolete. We train on DJI Telos that are discontinued and not yet obsolete, but we do computer programming and coding off of those so that they're writing the codes that they can now go to industry with to customize these drones so that they fly autonomously, easier, safer, with more efficiencies.
The term that drones is the future of farming is thrown around a lot. How relevant do you feel that is? Do you feel that these kids, that it's essential for them to be educated on drone technology?
I think drone technology is very essential. It's just kind of like, whenever you're seeing transitions from, the third industrial revolution into right now what we're experiencing is the fourth industrial revolution, where we're using artificial intelligences. And there's always a resistance to change. When I think back to my grandfather, who was still plowing and clearing and planting and seeding with mule teams, because those iron horses will never take over. And then we saw that slow transition, to the automated tractors, and to the hydraulic tractors, and then into now the autonomous tractors. And I think drones are going to be an important part, not the entire part, of a sustainable, efficient, progressive agricultural productionist. They'll need to know how to do that.
In the Jetsons' view of drones, where do you see the future of farming and drones going?
Well, the future of farming with drones really depends on bandwidth, how much Bluetooth technology, how much 5G technology is available in these rural settings, so that the drones can communicate with the receiver, the transmitter, possible other drones. Um, if you see some of the things that are happening with RFID tags and livestock, for getting biometric sensors on ear tags in cattle, and having a drone fly over that feed yard in Dodge City, Kansas to check herds. You know, those pin riders could be replaced eventually. Unfortunately, there's a lot of romance with that job, but they're hard to find good quality pin riders,
Right.
where you can get a real good drone fairly inexpensively. The barrier to entry is not very high, and you can fly a feedlot in an hour or two, transmit that data analysis, and find out which one of those cattle is already sick 3 days before you can visually identify that snotty nose, those dull eyes, that cow, that steer not drinking water. By that time, we're off of feed, affecting other cattle, losing productivity, requiring more antibiotics or treatments to bring that animal back into production. And if we can do just ride pins with the drone, we're saving all of that time, medicine, and efficiencies in just the cattle. When we talk about crops, you know, we have heat stress, we have low nitrogen identification, we can do thermal radar with drones, we can check the moisture content of the soil. And here in Arizona, we have a real problem with water. We don't have enough of it. And then sometimes we have too much of it. And we want to make sure that we're utilizing that resource to the best of our ability. We're really sustainable, and we're responsible for the environment, so that we have the proper slope in our fields, that when we irrigate it, we're getting more penetration, less runoff, and that water staying in the root zone longer, so the plant can take it up. Because once gravity pulls it through that root zone, it's a lost resource. We're just recharging the groundwater at that point. So water efficiencies are going to be critical. Heat stress, we can identify diseases through artificial intelligence. We can fly a field 3 or 4 days after seed planting to check germination rates. So if we're supposed to have, 10,000 seeds per 100 square feet, we can count those seedlings at that point to find out what our real production rate's going to be. That's a good time to contact the banker and say, instead of having 100% coverage, we're going to have 80%. So take all of my projected revenue and multiply it by 0.8, but all of my expenses are still the same.
Yeah.
That seems like the stay in business plan as opposed to go out of business plan. And when we're 3 or 4 days after that original seeding, we're days ahead of where we could visually see a bare spot. Well, now it's too late to go back in with the tractor and replant, because now we're going to compact, we're going to roll over, we're going to trash, we're going to kill. So we're going to leave it aside, whereas with these drones, we can put the seed hopper on it and go back and broadcast and replant when it's still time to do that. So we don't have to make that phone call to the banker and say it's 80%, it's still 100%.
So the average consumer's interaction with drones is, usually photography, real estate. And it's very obvious that there is so much technology and so many different avenues that these drones are used in farming. What tends to draw the attention of your students, and what keeps them engaged and wanting to further their education?
Well, historically, drones may have had a bad reputation from Christmases from 10, 15 years ago, when you would go under the Christmas tree and open up the drone, you'd charge the battery, you'd take it outside, you'd launch the drone, and then it would fly away
And crash.
and crash, and you'd never see it again. And if you were fortunate enough to maintain control of that drone, it may have gone into a tree, could have landed on the roof. So technology has brought those fears and eliminated them with return to home. You know, battery dying, return to home technology, lost communications, return to home technology. So that trough of disillusionment of that technology that everybody thought was going to be great, and then you found out that it was just a toy that didn't work, and now I'm not going to use it in my farm. So once we've got rid of all of those fears of crashing, losing, flying away of the drones, now we can take those drones and utilize them and code them. So the coding those drones is fairly simple. And where I live, there's a lot of $4,000 cars for sale. And everybody's got a car for sale for about $4,000. Well, if a student can take charge $250 to take a $200 drone and do a video of that car in 8 minutes, turn around a point, point of interest, a flyaway, a focus, and help somebody sell that car for $4,000, and they got $250, they're ready to go sell the next car.
Right.
And then the next car, and then the next car. And then they can program those drones to go into houses and fly through doorways and do 360-degree panoramics of kitchens, and then fly through another doorway, down a hallway, and go into a master bedroom, and then do another 360-degree turn, and then fly out the back Arcadia door over the pool and do a point of interest flight of that entire property. And I think a real estate agent would pay a kid pretty hefty dollar to help them sell a $300,000, $400,000, $700,000 house. And it doesn't take very long for that $200 drone to turn into a $1,000 drone.
So really, photography is still a great tool to introduce them to the drone technology as a whole.
They're all into photography and videography. They all have a TikTok channel. They're all media. They're all on Instagram, and everybody's looking for the latest and greatest angle and gee whiz project. And when that can be an assignment for class, I don't have any problems with them not turning it in.
You had mentioned earlier that it's hard to have a job at McDonald's in a town that doesn't have a McDonald's. So for these smaller towns and these kids that are growing up in these smaller agricultural towns, how does being educated in the drones help broaden their future and building that future for them?
So as an educator, I don't just look at the students in front of me as my subjects. I don't really know if I've done my job with that student for about 40 years.
Fair enough.
Because in 40 years, that student will now have grandchildren. So if I know that those grandkids have a better life because their grandparents sat in my classroom and learned something useful, that's when I know that I've done my job. So my vision is much broader than most people would probably look at a teacher's job. And so what I do at Rio Rico, like I said, 95% Hispanic, 85% free and reduced lunch. And when you talk about agriculture, they usually have a real negative connotation with being that migrant farm worker who's traveling between Salinas and Yuma, or picking, or they're going to be, you know, in a Christmas tree farm, they're going to be picking strawberries, they're going to be chopping cotton, they're going to be, and nobody wants that for their kids or their grandkids. So this here technology is generational change, where they can start making $25 in an agricultural career and change the trajectory of their family's lifestyle forever, and never once be a picker.
So it puts them on, to piggyback off of your word, the trajectory of not just a job, but a career.
It's a career. You know, they'll start off as being a videographer, photographer, scouting fields, mapping fields, providing those maps to the pesticide handler, the pesticide applicator, so that their time is spent being a handler and an applicator, not a field scout. And then they can specialize in doing that, and they can move up that way. They can program, they can build, they can repair, they can professional business management. They can go into aviation law if that's what their choice is. So we're not limiting choices, we're providing multitudes of opportunities. They can be CEOs, they can be lawyers, they can be PhDs in agronomy, they can be engineers in building and designing drones. That field scout is just the beginning of their opportunities.
Do you feel like at this point in their high school career, between the ages of 14 and 18-ish, that they understand that and are motivated by that? Or do you feel like they're more motivated by the current job of being able to operate the drone?
Okay, I'm going to give you for real life situation. Last summer, I'd bought, I'm going to say 8 ewes. And I took them home, and I left the ewes there, and I'd feed the ewes, and I'd turn the ewes out during the day, and at night they'd come back for their free dinner. And then I went to a teacher conference in Montana, and I left my wife in charge. And she's the very best wife you've ever had. Obviously, but when when it was time to feed the sheep that night, they had not yet returned home. And she was in a full-blown panic that the investment in the ewes was gone, the money was wasted. And the only thing I could do to settle her, because there was no calming her, I just could settle her. I called one of my students and I said, Talon, tomorrow morning, I need you to go to the house with your drone and fly a search and rescue mission and find these lost sheep. Sure enough, the next morning, 6:30, he called me from the house. By that time, they had returned. They were laying in the shade. But that was a $250 opportunity for Talon to go find sheep. He's got a drone, he has his own business, and he does this for cattle, dogs, sheep on an as-needed basis. He just graduated high school, and he's going to move on and do great things.
As a kid who's 16, 17 years old before they reach the age of 18, how do they set themselves up to be a business? How do they set themselves up for success to maybe not be a business now, but be a business as soon as they are out of high school and entering the workforce?
Well, it's really easy to start a business. All you have to do is say, I am a business. And I'm going to use my name and my social security number as my business. And I'm going to be a sole proprietor, and I'm going to keep expenses and receipts and I'm going to tally my income and my profit, and I'm going to analyze my numbers. You don't need a birthday or a degree to start a business. And so they can start their business as early as they choose to. Drone pilots start at 16, as early as they can, and then they can keep that same business. That business may change its structure over the life of it. It may become a partnership. It could become an LLC. But you can start an LLC when you're 14, 15, 16. You don't have to wait for that magic birthday.
You had mentioned earlier that kids now are very into social media, into content creation. How do you see social media growing the industry and bringing new kids that maybe aren't from a farming town, but from a bigger town, from Phoenix, from Scottsdale, and interesting them in the same path? Because there's so many different facets of the drone industry. It doesn't just have to be looking for sheep for your teacher.
I appreciate that. So the really good thing about the industry of agriculture is most people like to eat 3 times a day. I'm an overachiever. Some people get by with 2. And so everybody is already involved in the industry of agriculture. Now, because of social media and the 24-hour news cycle, we're very conscious about health and nutrition. And we're very careful about, you know, what we eat, where that food came from, and that food safety component of it. And so people are already becoming more and more involved in food choices. And when you take somebody whose only role in agriculture currently is a consumer, but they're a conscientious consumer and they're a socially conscious consumer, and now they want to be more involved and more active in where their food comes from. Is their food nutritious, wholesome, safe, and affordable? You know, the drones provide this opportunities. We do drone days in inner city schools, and kids find out that, you know, I'm not going to be a sheep farmer, I'm not going to be, you know, a nursery landscaper, but I can be a drone pilot.
So you emphasized the word affordable just a second ago. How does drone technology make the industry as a whole more affordable?
Well, that's a great question. So the utilization of drones makes production of food, fiber, natural resources more affordable because we have higher efficiencies. When you can utilize drones for scouting and applying and seeding, and the artificial intelligence is associated with those drones, you can cut your fertilizer bill by 30%. You can cut your water bill by 30%.
Which is huge.
Huge. You don't need that $400,000 tractor that's causing the compaction. That thing requires you to go and plow and disc and break up the compaction. And so these efficiencies make it more affordable for the farmer to stay in business. That farmer is not getting the 100% of that grocery bill. They're getting like 18% of that grocery bill. You know, warehouse, transportation, overhead, profits at every little layer is making most of that 83%, 82% of that grocery bill. And when you take a look at that small margin, 30% changes the success rate of farms.
Going back specifically to your program, when a kid enters your program at Rio Rico, what do they start out with? Do they start off, you know, do you do a big attention grabber where they're right on a drone right away? Do you talk about the importance of agriculture as a whole and then see who's interested in the drones? How does your program specifically work?
So my program specifically works where I'll get a freshman or a sophomore into the Ag 1 program, and we'll spend 9 weeks creating their personal learning plan, finding out what it is that they want to be when they grow up. So it's a career exploration in agriculture. So if you want to be a florist, Brittany, I'm not really going to spend a lot of time with you in wood shop.
Right.
But if somebody wants to be a drone pilot, I'm going to spend drone piloting with them and not a lot of floriculture. So I have to teach the whole broad spectrum of that industry of agriculture. So once we get through that first 9 weeks, I know what they want to be, what they want to learn, what industry certifications they're going to, and they're free to change their major at any time. But once we do that, then I can custom the curriculum to meet their needs. Now, we're fortunate that we have a land lab, we have a campus ag center, a farm at the school, and when we go to the farm, we have different skills that the students are working on. It might be greenhouse, nursery, landscape, could be poultry production, could be dairy cow production, swine, sheep, apple tree production. But I always have one kid flying the drone, video recording everybody working. And that student has gone through the drone pilot program, sat through the lessons, learned how the principles of flight, how drones work, put a drone in their hand and ran them through labs and skills so that they could safely fly a drone. They've studied for or passed their Part 107 certification test, but in class, their job is just to go around and video record kids working. And you'd be surprised at how many kids will come up to me and say, I want to fly that drone. If you want to fly that drone, this is what you need to do.
How can educators at other schools plug into your program or build their own program, piggybacking off of your ideas without recreating a wheel? Is that something that's available?
That is available. Great question. So a couple of years ago, a publishing company, ICEV Online, contacted me, and I became the curriculum specialist for the drone program that they have published online. And so we've written courses for drone piloting so that we're available in 20,000 schools, high schools across the country, in engineering, STEM, and agri-science. This drone curriculum is there. They have 24/7 access to my phone and email about how do you do this, you know, what makes sense. I speak at teachers' conferences and do workshops and camps, you know, all summer long.
For students that go to a school, for example, I went to high school in the middle of Scottsdale. We don't have an ag program at our high school. Is there a way for kids that are interested to still be able to plug into programs even if their school doesn't specifically offer them?
Yeah, so schools, the best thing that came out of the COVID pandemic was we got to throw away the excuse, we don't do that here. We've never done that before. Since then, everything's changed and more opportunities are available at more high schools. They have online courses, they have flex scheduling, they have hybrid scheduling, and that curriculum is available to every high school,
So
every community college.
For anybody watching that is interested, like how can they get plugged in and as a student get plugged into somewhere? Is there a site that they can go to? Is there any sort of resources that they can?
The sites that I would send them to would be the U-PASS, Farmitude, ICEV, or just Google search, you know, ICEV.
Or they can reach out to you directly.
They can reach out to me. I'm sure my contact information is
all over Google.
It's all over Google, Farmitude, and U-PASS.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking your time today and helping educate us on your education.
You bet. Thank you.